Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. We have an extra, very double, triple, quadruple special guest. It's my friend Greg Smith. I've known him for a long time throughout the years from different companies and things like that. And he is returning because he was here before he wrote his book. And now that he wrote his book, it just took a while for us to free up our schedules. And then also we divided his podcast into 4 podcasts. So I think that makes you kind of like number 1 or something like that. So welcome back, Greg Smith.
Thank you, Sean. I had such a great time last time. I guess I forgot that it was chopped up into 4 different segments. I guess once I start talking, it's hard to shut me up.
Well, we had lots of time to talk back then because I was just looking at when that was. And I think it was at the peak of lockdown. So like May 2020, something like that, or April.
My God. Wow. Yeah, that was like right in the middle of all the craziness. And that's about the time when I started writing my book. You know, my travel went from 40-50% to 0. And the kids were at home. The wife was working from home. And I was going crazy and I had to do something. So,
yeah, I really appreciate the style of your book, and it's kind of my style too. And I swear I didn't steal it from you, but it's just all fun and you're making wisecracks and stuff like that, trying to say as much as you can get away without getting in trouble, probably, sort of like what I do. And I'm sure you've never been in trouble before.
oh, no, never.
Yeah, let's just mention that your book. So it's called The Battery Powered Home, Foolproof Grid-Tied Lithium Storage.
That is a mouthful. I had a very good editor and publishing team who kind of kept the reins on me while I was writing. But the book title was very targeted. Just wasn't a lot of like my style kind of books out there. Like, Sean, you're incredible with the code related stuff.
I'm paying him to say that.
Yeah, it's true. You are just so great at being able to take all that codey stuff and make it understandable for the common person. But I didn't want to get into that because I wanted to broaden my audience a lot. And so I kind of targeted the end user and then people in the industry who just wanted to learn more about it and just, become more of a knowledgeable person so they can make more educated sale.
Yeah. And so also with books too, the main part of the title, so probably everybody knows your book as The Battery Powered Home. And then the second part of the title, which is usually in smaller print, and I have that with my books, and sometimes I can't even remember exactly what the second part of my title of my own book is. So Foolproof Grid-Tied Lithium Storage.
Yeah, I really wanted to focus in.
No, that's great.
On who my audience was, right? Like a lot of people ask, hey, when are you going to write an off-grid book? And I mean, really, the battery powered home could get you probably 85% of the way to an off-grid system, but I just didn't want to get into that. That is a completely different animal. And I put lithium storage in there so that the people would understand that I'm not covering the good old tried and true lead acid.
Yeah, and you've been doing this stuff forever. So I remember when we met, you were working at SMA and you were like the guy that was doing AC coupling. You probably did more early AC coupling training than anyone. I know you would have done DC coupled stuff too, like the Sunny Island and all that stuff.
Yeah, Sunny Island, I tell you, that's still my favorite hybrid inverter, the 5048U. And you're right, I did train a lot on that product. Matter of fact, at the height of my training career here in California, our marketing team estimated that I probably trained 25% of all the installers in California at that time. And the Sunny Island was always my favorite component. It was just so overly engineered for what the Americans wanted to use it for a grid tie battery backup or even like an off grid, because that thing was made for village electrification. Right? And so they just kind of dumbed it way down for the Americans.
Yeah, and there's this really cool movie that they made, and I don't know when they made it. Like they made it a long time ago. I can't remember exactly the dates, but they're like in the future in 2020 or 2015 or something like that, they will have systems like this. And it's just really cool. So if anybody wants to see that, we'll put a link in the show notes, and then we will just tell you how to Google it. Just do Sunny Island SMA or something like that. And I used to play that for all my classes too. It was like I could almost recite it.
Yeah, I know exactly the video that you're talking about. And
Uh,
they did another one with this site. It was on this atoll in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, way, way out, like in Guam area, I think. I know I'm going to butcher the word. I think it was called Tokelau or something like that. And we rolled in there with Sunny Islands, this big multi-cluster box. I think it was a 40 or a 60 kilowatt array ground mount. And this little island, like they only got supplies once a week on Wednesday. This boat would come out, bring everything in, and they were running this generator all the time, right? And they were paying, I don't know, $300-400 for a gallon of diesel fuel because, it had to be brought in. And so we rolled in there, did this complete setup, and turned the generator off. And that island was running on its own power, batteries and solar. And there were kids on that little island that had never not heard a generator in the background. I still get goosebumps.
that's pretty crazy. That's pretty reliable for a generator, though.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Uh,
That's true.
and that's pretty cool too. You got to go out there. So when did you start working for SMA? I know that you were doing stuff on submarines and things like that. And then when did you start working there?
Yeah, so I retired from the Navy in 2007, worked for a couple of companies. That was not a good time, if you guys remember, to
Oh
be
yeah,
jumping
financial
out of
crisis. Yeah.
oh man. Yeah, that was not a good time to be jumping out of a nice, stable environment into that economy. So I just worked these two part-time jobs in concurrency. And then in May of 2008 is when I started with SMA.
Awesome. Cool. That's pretty awesome. And then you went from SMA, and then when you were on the podcast before, you were working for Sonnen, otherwise known as Sonnen.
Yeah, yeah. They're another German company, very big in Europe. Sonnen. That's a German word for sun. So their Sonnen battery was essentially a sun battery. It was kind of a neat little marketing twist. And I helped them launch that product in 2015 in the United States.
And then after that, you got a job at Tigo, and that's where you're working right now.
Yeah.
Cool.
So an old SMA CEO of mine would call me up every 18 to 24 months and, hey, Greg, where you at? How's it going? And I was at Sun at the time, and he was working at Tigo. He said, hey, I got an opportunity for you. And I was like, Tigo, man, I don't know anything about, little MLPE. Like, what do I know about that? I'm a battery guy. He says, yeah, we need your skill sets. I can't tell you anything right now, but we need your skills. I was like, okay. And then so after they picked me up, Tigo launched its EI residential solution, which had its full turnkey solution. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. And for the module level electronics and rapid shutdown and all that kind of stuff, a lot of people were struggling for, having batteries and to have module level work. And so Tigo was the solution that would pretty much work with any inverter.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people, and like me, I finally got my Sunny Boy on the wall, a little 5K system. And there's just a lot of diehard string inverter people like me. And so, yeah, the Tigo module level power electronic, MLPE, which, like you said, it was a great solution for the people that wanted to keep using their technology.
Okay, so when I was in college, I went to this AC/DC concert and they shot off some cannons and I almost lost my hearing. And if I blur my eyes a little bit, it looks like you're wearing an AC/DC shirt. So you're kind of famous for this abbreviation, RTFM. I guess you sell shirts and things like that with RTFM. And so that means read the something manual.
Read the fun manual.
Yeah. And F stands for a lot of other frickin' things. So most people like to use the X-rated version when they're out in the field, tough solar installers and things like that. And I kind of get where you're coming from because on a lot of NABCEP exams, I believe there's going to be questions that people should study for where it's like the answer is like, read the manual. Equipment is tested and listed according to manufacturer's instructions. If you don't install things according to manufacturer's instructions, you void the warranty, which is actually doing a favor for the company because if they don't have to pay for the warranty, they're off the hook. And your job, a lot of times, is to tell people to RTFM.
Yeah, it's a struggle, right? And because a lot of the installer landscape is just different than when I came in, right? It's just different. There's a lot of installer error out there. I don't think that's even a disputable fact. I think everybody would agree with that. And a lot of installer error leads to really bad problems. And just to share this with you, because Tigo has really taken a round turn on the way, to use a Navy euphemism there. We've taken a round turn and really started looking at the knowledge base that we have and the documentation that we have to make it better and clearer for the kind of installers that are out there now. And they don't like to read. And I've seen it. I've been on site with our product, and the first thing they do is unpack everything and they throw the documentation in the corner with the trash, probably with some product that they didn't know was in a box, and they just start slapping things together.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the problems with being male is we have a tendency to do that.
That is true. That is true. Which is, I'm not coming down so hard on them, but after reviewing 2 years worth of our service logs and really digging into this issue, we found that about 30% of the calls that we get are found in the manual. Like if they would have just, and not even a manual, like all of the stuff comes with a quick start guide, pretty common in this industry because nobody wants to sift through a manual. So they just have one or two pieces of paper and, just, hey, put this here, put that there. It's very quick, very easy to understand. But a lot of people don't even look at that. So 30% of the calls that we get are found in our documentation.
Great, great. And so you've worked for different companies that make electronics. So you're kind of an electronics expert, RTFM expert. And I'm kind of wondering, like, what would you recommend for people that are just trying to get into the industry and don't have any specific brand? Like they want to be brand non-specific. So just start reading different manuals?
Yeah. So every piece of it, like every battery, every inverter, regardless of the make or model, they're all pretty much the same. Right? So if you read up on one of them, you're probably 90% of the way to anybody else's inverter. That's just the reality. They're just pretty much commoditized at this point, kind of like how modules were back in 2010, right? Like they're just kind of all the same, but each manufacturer has its own little quirk. So if you're new in the industry, most companies just want to use one or two products. That way they don't have to train on 6 or 7 different products. It's just one or two. And so you can do that. That's manageable.
Yeah, and then another thing too is like they have different languages that they communicate with and things like that. So I guess being at Tigo too makes you an expert with that because Tigo works with, I guess, pretty much every different brand, right? Even if they didn't even like each other, they would work together. Except for maybe, well, I guess there's some brands that only work with them and they make sure that nothing else works with it or something.
Exactly.
Like
And, the dirty little secret, though, for us is that although we have a lot of inverter manufacturers that put our communication devices for rapid shutdown or monitoring inside the inverter, the only thing we rely on that inverter for is a power supply to our communication device. So if our stuff is not in somebody else's inverter and it's just external, that inverter, that battery has no idea that we are even there in the system. Like the TS4, the module level components are just up on the roof attached to each module. We have the communication device sitting out here, maybe in a NEMA 3R box, and they're just chugging away doing their own thing. However, one communication device that we have called the CCA speaks Modbus, to your point about different communication. And so although we can't control another inverter or battery or whatever, we can connect to them via Modbus and receive that data so that we can put it on our own portal. But that's the extent of communication that we have.
okay, I'm just thinking up like a stupid, irrelevant thing is since you can put a Tigo up there and have the inverter not notice it, could you put a Tigo in front of a Tigo and then have the other Tigo not notice it?
So, yeah, actually, we can do that. And we have done that with our inverter and our battery. So we essentially AC couple multiple Tigo inverters in the same system.
So when you say AC couple, you really mean DC, right?
No, no.
Oh, okay. So you have like different inverters that have different Tigos on them.
So let me just clarify this just because you brought it up.
Uh-huh.
So we have an ATS that
Automatic transfer switch.
automatic transfer switch, 200 amp service entrance rated, and a single Tigo inverter directly connects to that ATS. So if the homeowner wants more solar, then that's fine. They can just install another Tigo inverter that will not be connected to the ATS. It'll just be connected to the AC panel, just like a third-party inverter.
Oh, okay. And when you say Tigo inverter, you mean inverter that's connected to Tigos?
No, I mean like a Tigo, like our EI inverter. So we have our own inverter. We have a 3.8, a 7.6, and an 11.4. And so all
Okay.
of those are compatible with our ATS.
Okay, great. So when did Tigo come out with their own inverters?
I know it like breaks my heart, man. Like we're at all these RE Plus shows and people come up and they're like, "Oh, yeah, Tigo, you got your own battery and storage solution, huh? When did that come out?" It's like about 2 years ago.
Okay, well, that's what the industry. So anyway, so my question though, it's kind of a theory thing and it's just like a stupid question. So what if I put a Tigo and then I attached it to another Tigo before I connected it to a module? Would it work? I know it wouldn't have any benefit. It would just have like, some efficiency losses or something like that.
Yeah, wouldn't do anything because, well, shoot, I mean, I got one right here.
Uh-huh. All
Always
right.
have my props with me, right? So
Uh-huh.
you got long
Pull it out
lead.
of your pocket.
Yeah. Whoop.
And so also too, like most people will just listen to this, but they can also check it out on YouTube for
Okay.
props
Well, thank
and for
you.
your shirt.
Thank you for telling me. So this little module level component that I have has two pairs of leads. It has a longer set, which connects these TS4s together once they've been connected to the module. Then they got these little short leads right here that are actually connected to the module. So we could connect two of these in series, but only one of them would be connected to a module. So therefore it wouldn't have any added benefit. And considering
Yeah,
how
it wouldn't
cost
have any added benefit, but if I connected a Tigo to a module, would it still work?
oh yeah,
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 okay, cool. I'm going to just
it
do
would
that.
work.
And there's probably somebody out there that doesn't know how to hook them up that's connecting a Tigo to a Tigo to a Tigo to a module, like triple, quadruple maximum PowerPoint tracking, just to get a little extra out of it.
So luckily we have not had that issue
Uh-huh, yeah.
because only one of these devices can connect to a single module. And so
Hmm.
they're just kind of self-explanatory. Now, we've
I
seen
told you it
installers
was a
do other
stupid
crazy.
question before I even
No, it's
asked it.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not because we've seen installers do other crazy stuff with our equipment.
Yeah, and it wouldn't make any sense why somebody would do that, but hey, what the heck? Uh, then you have a backup sitting there waiting. Then you have like somebody thinks that they have two modules when you only installed one, something like that. And speaking of like modules today, I just got an email that there's some American distributor advertising 8 cents a watt for First Solar, 10 cents a watt for Tier 1.
Wow.
I was like, in the US, like, I don't really get it. Like, I've heard that it's 11 cents, like in Australia, but that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess they're just trying to dump inventory, I guess. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like maybe they don't come with glass.
Yeah.
You got to add your own glass.
Yeah, it's a DIY project. They'll give you
Uh,
62 cells and you just got to kind of piece it all.
yeah, it comes with a soldering iron.
It's crazy though, because when I came in, 160, 180 watt module was like $1,200.
Yeah.
So string sizing really mattered back then,
Uh-huh.
right? You didn't want to put one extra module per string if you didn't have to, because that might knock you out of a bid.
Uh,
And now you can get a 400 watt module for $300, right? And so I tell people, load your roof up. If you're doing batteries, load that roof up with as much solar as you can.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
only going to benefit you.
Yeah, like 8 cents a watt, 10 cents a watt, whatever, like double that, and then maybe I'll start to believe it if you doubled that for right now in America, where we're trying to avoid paying for things made with bad labor. And you're putting solar on your north roof because your north roof in most of the United States makes about 2/3 of your south roof.
Yeah.
And so if you're already
It's
out there, just fill it up.
Yeah, no, that was a huge design no 10, 12 years ago.
Oh, I know. We would have been canceled.
Oh my gosh, we would have gotten all kinds of emails from people wagging their fingers at us, right? But now, hey man, 2/3 is still better than nothing.
Yeah.
And homeowners will use every watt hour you give them. And so if putting stuff on a north face roof along with the other roof faces on an energy storage system, if that'll help you fill that battery up faster or offset your loads, do it.
Yeah, and another thing too that I'm telling people is they're always asking about recycling and stuff. And they've got some 20-year-old or sometimes 10-year-old PV system, and it's maybe 15% efficient instead of 20, and it still makes beautiful sine waves. So if they are going to get a new system, stick that old one on the north roof.
Yeah.
But another thing that people need to watch out for too when they get a new system is they're going to reevaluate your net metering, your interconnection. And so I think probably with the net metering 1 versus net metering 3, you might get a system that's twice as good and you only get paid the same amount,
That's a very contentious point now, Sean, because you got, and I got blasted for this because I'm like, man, those modules are going to last 20, 30 years. I mean, and NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado, has an array test bed, and they've got modules that have been running 20, 30 years, which show less degradation than the 1 or 2% average per year, right?
Yeah,
And I was like, man, leave the modules up and leave the array alone. The inverters last about 10 years, maybe longer if you get a really good one, and just add a new inverter and keep going. And they're like, why would I do that when I can just replace the entire array and get a better system? All right, I guess. I don't know if it was working for you. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? But
yeah, I have a couple of systems that people replaced, and I'm going to go install them. Got some property, and go play with those things. And, it's like 15%, 20%, whatever. It just means it takes up a little bit more space.
exactly.
And then getting hooked into that old net metering too, if that could happen, that's always a benefit too.
Yeah, that's true.
I noticed that you are on the ESIP, that's the ESIP, or the Energy Storage Installation Professional JTA crew. And so I was just reading your name. And one thing that was kind of interesting too, that I just Googled JTA. I'm always working on my classes and stuff. And so I just Googled ESIP JTA, and it gave me the original one that I first saw, and they changed it a little bit. And I don't know if they even changed any of the words. I think they mostly just changed the pictures. And so it was kind of funny. The picture of the Energy Storage Installation Professional, like right on the cover of it, was somebody like on a roof, like a model, obviously. Like we always make fun of the solar models that, don't have any calluses or anything like that. And she's up on the roof and she's looking at a level. Like she's like measuring stuff by looking at, just holding the level up in the air. And so I thought that was pretty funny. But then I think what happened is some people made fun of it, and then NABCEP went and swapped out the pictures for batteries and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, and our industry tends to use the same like overused images, like that red shingled house with the solar on it. Like that's a German house, but love to use that. If anybody has a drone, you can make a lot of money doing stock photography. I tell you that right now.
Yeah, well, we had to do that. But I think I know the picture that you're talking about, that it's on like tons of websites selling stuff. It's just like a free picture that somebody can use. And I remember like some years ago, it was even more popular. There was some guy, obviously a model, with like a blue helmet and looking at plans and doing some other things. Like they probably took him out, made 5 pictures with him, and it was just all over the place everywhere.
Yep. So, yeah, I know that guy.
Yeah. Someday we're going to run into one of those guys. We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Shaun White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Shaun White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Shaun White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSean, that's solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show. And so when you're on this committee coming up with the job task analysis, that's the JTA, and I was on the JTA for the NABCEP PV installer, which is now called the NABCEP PV installation professional. They just changed the name for that. And it's been quite a while. It's been over a decade since I was on that committee. But I remembered it was a lot of fun hanging out with these super smart people and coming up with some ideas and things like that. And you guys had your work cut out for you on this one, because with all the other ones, they've been around for a long time. It's for PV, which is, people are more used to, and that's mostly what NABCEP is PV and all that kind of stuff. And so you got to sit down and come up with a job task analysis. And so then when they write an exam, they base it on the job task analysis. So there's going to be like these different percentages of what they want to have on the test. And then you're going to pick some of those things out and come up with test questions. But I guess you weren't doing the test questions, you were doing the job task analysis, because if you were doing the test questions, maybe you're not allowed to tell me, I believe. So
right. They did not invite me to do the test, which I'm kind of glad in hindsight.
Oh yeah, sure. We believe you. I know you're probably like some top secret military guy too. You were like doing submarines and all that stuff. You know how to keep a secret.
Yeah. Well, I did get to evaluate the questions once they were written. I'll tell you what, they used this guy, and I'm so sorry, I cannot remember his name. It was from a company, and he does all this psychosomatic.
I remember that. Psychometricians. We had one.
Psychometrician.
Yeah, we had one named Lynn, and she was really cool with like red hair.
This guy was incredible. Like, it totally blew me away. And he also came and did the testing. And I tell you right now, if you have any doubts to the validity and to the continuity of all of the NABCEP stuff, you can just put that to rest, because it was such an eye opener for me to see this whole process. Like, that is an airtight process. If you get that NABCEP exam, if you pass any of the exams and get the certification, that is a significant accomplishment, because the materials are no joke.
Yep. Yeah, especially that ESIP. It's hard for me to say ESIP because I'm so used to saying PVIP, ESIP. So maybe I'll just still say ESIP for right now. But that was definitely the hardest NABCEP test I ever took.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like, there's just a lot of different things coming from different directions that could cover everything from PV to like lead acid batteries to NFPA 855 to the IRC, and then NFPA 70E about like workplace safety, all that kind of stuff. So there's like a ton of stuff that was on there. And most people that I've talked to that took the test only came in with the NEC. And it's like, that's the one that we know the most. And then there's NFPA 855, the energy storage standard. And sometimes that's not even the same as the IRC or the IFC. So that's the International Residential Code, the International Fire Code. And those ones, the IRC and the IFC, those are the ones that get adopted by the jurisdictions. They don't adopt the NFPA 855. So it was a lot of work taking that exam. I thought it was something else.
It was crazy, man. Like, when they asked us back to review the questions, we got to take the exam, and there were heavy hitters in this group along.
Yeah, I remember Ward Bauer, who invented the grid tie inverter that I was on the NABCEP PVIP committee with. And I talked to him at the NABCEP conference, and he's like, yeah, that was like really hard.
It was brutal. There were people that wrote the JTA along with me, wrote the questions. They failed the exam.
Oh, did they tell you guys if you passed or failed?
Yeah, that was the first thing we did, right? And me and a couple other people like barely squeaked by. We were like, holy smoke, we didn't study for it. We're like, we wrote this JTA. Like, how hard can it be?
And what are you going to study? Because you wrote the JTA, right?
So funny, a while back, a good friend of mine who was on the exam writing committee, so I don't want to say his name, but we go way back. And he called me as he was walking to a buddy's house. And he said, "Hey, Greg, I just want to call you and say, hey, thanks for carrying the load for the ESIP certification references, because your book was one of the few non-code related references." And I was so happy. Like, I talked to the NABCEP people. I was like, "You guys use my book as a reference for that thing?" Like, "Yeah, why not?" It was so cool. It's such an honor.
Oh yeah, I see that. And another thing just like about your book too is that it's such a fun read that even if people didn't care about batteries, they should just read it anyway because it's just like fun and snarky. That's your name for your website, I guess, right? What is it?
Oh,
Snarky
yeah.
Solar Guy?
Snarky Solar Guy. Yeah. I came up with that one. I'm not good with names. Like, it takes me an hour just to come up with a new gamer name. So I was so happy that he threw that one out. But yeah, it's been fun. That's for sure.
Yeah, I need to go read your book again too. And then just another thing too is we're talking about doing some work together. And so people should stay tuned for that. And so we'll get some class material going. So we were talking about the exam. You took the test. So you took it, you passed it. It was hard. And that's pretty good that you passed it. And what do you think people should study more for? What kind of surprised you about it? Or is it just too long ago? How long has it been? Like, I'm the first one to pass it, and you can
I
see it
read
on the
that.
NABCEP website.
Yep.
And it was in January is when I passed it.
Yeah.
I still think it took a couple of months before I even knew that I passed it, a month or two, something like that, probably because I was the first. And as of this recording, there's 7 people that have passed it. And since you took it and you passed it, I think they should put you on the website too.
Well, I mean, we didn't officially take the test. They just gave us all the questions and said, "Here you go, do it." And then after we went through, this is where the psychometrician came in. We reviewed all the questions in order. Like, what about this one? What about that one? And the reason they did this is so that mostly it was legal reasons, right? So if you didn't pass the test, nobody could come and say, "Oh, that test is biased," or whatever. That is the most fair exam. And this goes for all the NABCEP exams. They are the most fairly written and the most fairly scored exams that I've ever seen. And it's because they take so much time. We picked apart one question for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And you have to have majority consensus for the question to move on. I passed the initial one. I do not have my certification. I did not take the official exam.
So I'm going to give you a sticker that says provisional ESIP or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Uh,
don't know if I deserve that one.
yeah, I remember too, like hearing somebody say at one time, it was quite a while ago, so inflation, it would be different, that each question in the bank is worth $1,000. Like that's how much they spend on it. And I remember showing up at these meetings, and like we're talking, over a decade ago, might have been like 14 years ago, something like that. And I remember like putting together these questions and be like, "Man, these are some great questions." And all the other people on the committee did too. And they're like, "Man, these are great questions." And then we would go meet around some big table and you show your question, and then everybody beats it up. And then all of a sudden by the end of the day, everybody's all depressed. Going like, "My question is, I thought it was so good." And the hardest part was writing the wrong answers, like writing a test question that can have 3 wrong answers that aren't just wrong answers where like the psychometrician, like sometimes the psychometrician would be like, "That's a terrible question because I know the answer and I don't know anything about solar."
Right.
And so it was like lots of weeding out and, sitting around the
Yeah.
table and coming up with all kinds of stuff.
And I
Yeah.
used a lot of this stuff when I was in the military. I was a master training specialist. And so we had to write test questions, and you have to put distractors in there. And I mean, all the tests in the military are multiple choice, right? Just like on the NABCEP, it's just the easiest way to grade the test. And you're not trying to like screw the test taker over with all these intricate distractors, right? Is it 2.46 or 2.47? Like, you're not trying to do
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
But you have to put something in there that if they know the answer, they should be able to pick it A, B, C, D, just like that. And if they don't, if they know the material, they can start deducing okay, well, I know that's not that one because that answer goes to another question, right? And so that is really the approach that we took. And that psychometrician just kept everybody focused on that. Like you said, they don't know anything about our industry. So if they can guess the answer, it's a bad question or it's a
Yeah.
bad answer bank.
Yeah, and another thing too that sometimes people worry about is they're like, man, the test is going to be on the 2017 NEC, and I've been studying the 2020 NEC. And I think that if there's a test question, this is just my opinion. I don't know, I can't swear by it in every case, but if there's a test question that would have a different answer based on a different version of the NEC within the last 5 versions of the NEC, something like that, that comes out every 3 years, they would throw it away for the most part.
Mhm.
With like a couple exceptions, like they didn't have rapid shutdown and then they do. And so they might be some rapid shutdown question, but they're not there to trick you based on what version of the NEC or, little small details.
Right.
Like it might happen by accident sometimes, but like if they have a question and then the new version of the NEC just changed the answer, and they didn't plan on that. But then I think they would probably just go, let's take that one off the test, throw it in the bank, and see what we can do with it later on, something like that.
Yeah, it sounds
Mm-hmm.
plausible, right?
Yeah.
Like they want people to pass, right? And I don't know, I'm kind of bummed that only 7 people have passed that exam since it came out.
Yeah, I wonder how many people have taken the exam, and maybe only NABCEP knows. It was just completely different too, because every other NABCEP certification exam, you just use the NEC, and they're all right now. Currently, they're on the 2017 NEC. They have a pretty good digital copy right now that's on the platform. And then this one comes out. They don't have any digital copies of anything. And I just added it up yesterday how much it costs to buy all 3 of them, including shipping and taxes, and send them to my
Yeah.
house. And it was over $500.
Yeah.
So I
Mhm.
think maybe there could be some way where people could share them and things like that. Like we can have 3 copies that we toss around or something. Maybe NABCEP could make money off of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
like rent this book for a week.
Yeah. I don't know. The resources, as far as energy storage goes, like, yeah, you got to know code, right? You got to know it's a lot of DC current, running around in those batteries, and you got to be safe. But in my experience, the thing that causes the most service call is not all that code stuff. It's not. It is a poor design, and the code does not get into that. It doesn't tell you how to manage customer expectations. It doesn't tell you how to do a load analysis. It doesn't tell you how to analyze the loads or tell you how to come up with an adequately sized battery bank. Those are all the things missing from the code, but cause 80% of service calls, regardless of the company that you're in.
Yeah, like the code doesn't care if your system works. It just wants it not to burn down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They are not customer advocates for production.
Well, not burning your house down is pretty good for the customers too.
That's a good, yeah, good.
Unless they're really bad customers. Okay, and so like we've got different types of energy storage and we've got kilowatt hours. And one of the things that I was thought was kind of interesting yesterday is I was looking at 70E and arc flashes and stuff like that. And they talk about calories. And so that just kind of reminded me like that energy is a calorie and that could be translated to barbecue. And you're kind of famous for barbecue. So anybody out there, you want to learn how to barbecue, go follow Greg Smith on LinkedIn and you could see him doing some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, and I've got a YouTube channel too, Snarky Solar Guy, and I think my barbecue videos get more play than my solar videos.
Uh-huh.
I'm not getting on a stump and trying to, preach to people about solar and storage. I'm just having, a nice time cooking up a brisket or some ribs or whatever. And I think a lot more people relate to that.
Uh, hey, have you ever seen that thing where they plug into the wall, stick 2 ends into a hot dog? You ever seen that?
Yes. Not only have I seen it, I've done it.
Uh,
And I mean, I grew up in Arkansas, so we kind of do all that redneck stuff. But I was already in the Navy when we did this, and we did it at the barracks. We actually took one of the lamps that was in the barracks room and we cut it off, went into the lamp part, plugged it in, and yeah, actually did that.
how did it taste? Like with that arc on the fat and the
It had like this metallic,
little copper to it?
whatever. We were dumb sailors and probably had too much to drink, and
Uh,
nothing good ever comes after, hey man, watch this.
I'm sure I was doing something just as unhealthy that same exact day.
Yep.
That would be kind of interesting to do a little bit of that on your video, you know?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I've come a long way from two conductors plugged into a wall to a nice offset smoker.
Uh, that's pretty cool. So, do you do a lot of smoking?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. That was another thing I did during COVID. So I wrote my book and I learned how to barbecue. So that first stimulus check that we got, dude, I bought a really nice grill and I took Aaron Franklin's master class,
Uh-huh.
who's a big Texas barbecuer. He's got a restaurant that if you're not in line at 6 a.m., you ain't getting brisket. So very famous guy. And I watched his master class, followed it all, and then just got better and better. But yeah, the brisket is like the true American coup de grace of barbecue. That's just like the height. If you can do a good brisket, then you're doing good because it takes a lot of babysitting sometimes.
All right. So, maybe what we could do too is just talk a little bit about your book and tell everybody to buy your book. And so, the battery powered home. And where do you recommend people get it? I know that it's like a really good deal. What is it? $2.99 on Kindle. There's no excuse not to have that. And then another thing that I noticed too, that I was going through the book and it had a quote from Christopher Pike. Are you talking about Star Trek there?
Mm, I don't think so.
So it says, a true teacher would never tell you what to do, but he would give you the knowledge with which you could decide what would be best for you to do. Christopher Pike. And I guess there's also an author named Christopher Pike, but I'm kind of more of a Trekkie.
Yeah. Yeah, so is my wife. We bump heads because I'm more of a Star Wars guy.
Oh,
But I can
okay.
appreciate the Star Trek, they get into the science behind it. And yeah, we're Star Wars, just, yeah, we're going to go really fast. And there they go. So,
Yeah, it's kind of my theory that Star Trek is real and that they are actually influencing us to make a movie about all this stuff that already happened somewhere else in the universe or in the future. What do you think? I don't know.
yeah, Star Wars always cracked me up, right? It's like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but it's kind of in the future because they have lasers and spaceships, right?
Uh-huh.
Whereas Star Trek is definitely way, way ahead, right?
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, that always kind of confused me, but whatever.
Yeah, that was the part about Star Wars for me, that it's just like they're going around on the desert with some car that doesn't have wheels. It's like, wouldn't they just have some kind of spaceship, or I don't know, like they would get you there faster without like having to bounce around on the road if you had that kind of technology. But hey, I don't know. I still like it too. May the force be with you. I
Absolutely.
like them all. And so maybe you could tell us just a little bit more about your book. Like chapter 2 is trons. Do you mean like electrons?
Yeah, yeah.
Huh?
So there is a lot of Navy speak sprinkled in here, but it's not unrelatable, right? Like I tell you what it means. I have a glossary in the back, and that's what we would call electricity and electronics on the boat. I was a sonar technician, so I got a lot of training with
Oh, for like tron as in electronics. Okay.
electronics, yeah. And so
Okay.
there's a lot of stuff that went on the sub, and that was just another quick way that we could tell people what to do. It's funny because turning off and turning back on an inverter that's having issues has the same effect as a multi-million dollar sonar system. Like I can't even tell you how many times just turning the system off and turning it back on would fix an issue.
Cool. Awesome. I remember like a long time ago when they first had computers, I think that's what you did with a Mac. I can't remember if it was Windows or Mac, but one of them, you just turned it off and on and it worked again.
Yeah, probably Windows because that was my experience.
Okay, maybe it was Windows. Okay. I think I had both problems because I was running Windows on a Mac way back in the day, which I might have to do again soon because I'm working on doing something with PVSys and I have a Mac and that only works for Windows.
Yep, that is true. That's a good program though.
PVSys?
Yep, that's got some beef to it.
All right. So when did you use PVSys?
Back in my late SMA days and then in my Sonnen days.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Awesome. Okay, cool. And when you say beef, what do you mean? Like it's
Oh,
really accurate at
it is.
estimating things and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, a lot of number crunching. It's a beefy
Hmm.
system, right? So it does a lot of number crunching.
That's a nice barbecue reference too.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Everything always comes back to barbecue,
Uh-huh.
but it's a good tool. Like it's a great tool. And helioscope is another one that I use. Paul Grana, he and I go way back. And all these tools are estimation tools, right? And we need them because the banks need this information before they're going to loan all these companies money, right? And in my experience, which is kind of cool for the owners of the systems, is that the systems usually produce more than those estimations. So I guess those tools are only as good as the information that you put in.
Well, we've covered a whole lot of stuff. And if you want to find out more, go back to the COVID days when we were in lockdown and check out the podcasts over there in 2020. We've got 4 different ones. We talked for so long, we divided it into 4 different pieces, and it was some good stuff. And Greg now is going to tell you where to buy his book, his shirts, and I don't know. I don't know if we could buy your barbecue yet, but someday. Mm.
Not yet. I mean, I've had people ask me at one of the NABCEP conferences, I brought a rub that I made
Uh,
and gave it to a few friends. They're like, dude, you should sell this. But that's
uh,
all I need is one more project, you know? So the best place to get my book is on Amazon, right? It does offer the Kindle, a soft cover and a hard cover. And if you just go on Amazon and search for Smith battery powered home, I pop right up.
and we're going to put it in the show notes too, all this stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, my merch, this is just something that I did for me.
And so the merch, for those of you who are not looking at this on YouTube right now, it looks like AC/DC, but then it's RT, then it's got the lightning bolt, and it's FM for read the frickin' manual.
Please, sir, ma'am, read it.
And I know like that you have shirts for the battery powered home, read the frickin' manual, and maybe you could explain all the stuff that you have.
Yeah. So at one of the NABCEP conferences, I wore this shirt and people, oh my gosh, I love it. I want one. So I just made an online shop. And if you go to snarkysolarguy.com, that's my author website. And at the very bottom, if you scroll down on the right side, there's a link that goes to the merchandise page. And yeah, I've got shirts and mugs, and I made just as a goof because it was available. It's a doormat that looks just like this.
Uh-huh.
That thing is the most popular item that I sell. It like blew me up. Doormat. So yeah.
Do you ever like run into it? You're walking into some solar company.
No, but people,
Uh,
they'll reach out to me on LinkedIn and they'll send a picture of it like in their door. And they, going into the business, like, yeah, we want everybody to know this is what you should do every day, every time you're on a job site, RTFM. And I did not come up with that. That's an old Navy term. And then I found out, working for the Germans, they had a similar saying, right? So it's a global, maybe even a galactic common phrase that everybody knows.
well, I've been giving you credit. You got to came up with the lightning bolt part.
So I didn't even come up with this design. Another buddy at Tigo, who is so much more creative than me, says, dude, I made this for you. I
Uh-huh.
didn't ask him for it. I was like, are you kidding me? And I just had it like printed out on my background. And then when people, or when I made a t-shirt, I just took that design. So I surround myself with more creative people because I'm just not that creative.
So everybody get that. Get your RTFM gear, get your battery powered home book, and then hang out with us and connect with us on LinkedIn and things like that. And stay tuned because we are going to be doing some stuff together on HeatSpring, which we're going to talk about as soon as we hang up here. So thanks for listening to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. To get yourself ESIP certified, that's Energy Storage Installation Professional, go to Solar, SEAN, that's SolarSean.com. Woo!